Welcome back to my channel, everyone. So today we're going to do a follow-up video to motorcycle touring in Europe. So this will be part 2, so if you want to watch the first video about tips and tricks of motorcycle touring in Europe, then go and check that one out. I'll put a link in the description and a link up above. But we're going to build on the first video, and I'm going to give you some tips that I've learned from touring on my motorcycle in Europe. The location today, hopefully it's as good as the last time we did this video. We're in Norway on the RV250, I think it is, so all in the fjord area of Norway. Okay, so the aim of this video is just to give you some ideas of things to think about if you're motorcycling in Europe. Wow, look at this. Is that a caribou? Did you just see that? Sorry, I got distracted, but there you go. Oh, there he is. Wow. Whew, right. That was a bit of excitement, wasn't it? Well, cut a long story short, I went to see if I could see either of those two animals with my proper camera, but they'd long since disappeared. So, we shall resume where we left off. Okay, so number 1 is take your registration documents and insurance documents, so proof of insurance. A couple of things about this. The registration documents may be needed in some countries. For example, when you enter Morocco, you need to show your registration document to prove that you own the vehicle. Even though on the top of the V5C it says this is not proof of ownership, this is the kind of thing that other countries might require. Proof of insurance is also very useful, because it'll say how many days cover you've got in European countries, and it also, if you look at the second page of the certificate, usually lists this in different languages, so that the jolly men in blue jumpers can be appeased in whatever country you're in. Okay, point 2, we're going to talk about biker greetings. And in the UK, if you are a friendly sort, you may give a nod of a gesture, a friendly gesture to other bikers. Why do we give a nod? Well, because in the UK we're using our throttle hand, which would be facing the opposing traffic, to modulate our speed. In Europe it's actually a lot easier than that, because I can just take this hand off and I can give a wave, which they frequently do, or indeed stick 2 fingers, I know what you're thinking, 2 fingers out this way, the Winston Churchill way of doing 2 fingers. And that basically means 2 wheels down, or what we would say is stay shiny side up. You can also kick a leg out as well, if you're more comfortable doing that, to keep both hands on the bars, and that's quite a friendly gesture. But do be polite and friendly to our European biker brothers and sisters, of course. Okay, the next point. When is just as important as where in my book. So, for example, if you're going somewhere hot, so let's take Croatia as example, that was where we did the last video. It's better to go in April or September, early October, because it's cool enough to be comfortable, so you can wear your kit and not feel like you're sweating buckets. But it's also less busy if you're outside the main holiday seasons. So keep in mind that seasonality is really important in your choice of destination. Also bear in mind when we talk about the conditions is that temperature can vary hugely with elevation. So I don't know how high we are now. We could be 1500 meters, for example. It's 11 degrees. Yeah, it's 21 degrees down in the bottom of the valley. So I've got a 10-degree difference, and I need to have the correct kit and be prepared for such a difference. I'm just going to pull over and let these vehicles go past. Puts me off a little bit when people follow me when I'm doing a video. At least you guys get the nice view anyway. Okay, so we were saying about when is as important as where. We're in Norway at the moment, and the temperature here can vary hugely as well, depending on the month. So it's not just altitude, but basically be prepared. Take warm and cold kit. If you're going south of Europe, then you perhaps don't need the warm stuff, but these northern countries can be very hot or very cold in the same few days. Okay, let's talk specifically about the kit you need. Most countries are the same as the UK, and that the helmet is the only really essential piece of motorcycle gear that you need, or legally I shouldn't say you need, you're legally required to wear. In Belgium, you have to wear full protective gear to include boots, trousers, jacket, gloves and helmet. So if you don't wear any of those items, any one of those items, then you risk penalties. Okay, let's talk about camping. Now, camping is all good fun, but I find generally it's not worth it because cheap accommodation can be found, either hostels or Airbnbs, or in the case of Norway, you can stay in little wooden cabins at campsites. So I say camping's not worth it because inexpensive accommodation can be found, and you have to carry the tent and the sleeping bag and all that stuff on the bike. Plus it takes a little bit extra time every time you arrive at your location for the evening and you depart in the morning. You add extra minutes setting up and unpacking the tent, which is a bit of a pain, to be honest. Okay, let's talk about fueling the bike. So I would say fill up whenever you can. I would usually fill up after 100 kilometers out here in Norway, because you frankly don't know when you're going to be able to fill up again. And little things like you may be going across a national park where they don't build BP garages every 2 miles for obvious reasons. There may be different local laws, like on a Sunday they don't open, so if you don't fill up on Saturday night and you want to do big mileages on a Sunday, then you know you're at risk of not having the fuel, not being able to go your journey. So I would say fill up when you get down to half a tank, just don't leave it. Okay, you'll have to stop more often than perhaps you would at home, but I think it's worth it for that extra peace of mind. Okay, next point, take ferries. So why do I say take ferries? Well, if you're going somewhere like Spain or Portugal, then it could be tempting to ride down all the way through France, but you'll find that quite boring, quite expensive because they're all toll roads and you'll be paying for fuel, and quite tiring. Much nicer to get a ferry, sit on the ferry, have a nice cabin to yourself, or bunk in with some mates to make it cheaper. You can then let the ferry do the work. 33 hours later you'll appear in Spain nice and refreshed and ready to ride. You won't be tired out. Same as coming up to Norway, you can take a ferry and that'll cut out most of the journey through Belgium, Holland and Denmark to get here. So ferries are the way forward. Also, use the example of Norway again, if you're crossing the fjords, don't take a bridge, take a ferry. Really cheap, you're talking about 36 krone, Norwegian krone, and you get to see this different view of the landscape from the water, and you also get to talk to people on the ferry, so that's a definite good one. So when you can take a ferry because it's quite sociable as well as useful. Okay, next point, be flexible with your schedule. In the past I've tried to book everything in advance and have an Excel spreadsheet of where I'm going to be when, but in reality it just doesn't quite work out like that, given that you know you may be more or less tired depending on the day, you might have had a bad night's sleep, you might be unwell. So booking everything in advance I just feel is putting a little bit too much pressure on yourself. I find it easier now just to book things on the day, or somewhere like this, I mentioned the campsites, you can just turn up, knock on a little window and say, can I rent one of your cabins for 25 quid, and they'll say yes, sure. But again, go back to when, because I'm going slightly before the busy season, so it gives me more options in that regard. So take that into consideration. If you're going at the peak season, then that'll be more difficult to just book things on the fly. Okay, little tip, Rewaterproof all of your kit. So I was hoping for good weather on this trip, fingers crossed, and I've had a few days of good weather, but I've also had a few bad days as well. So before I left, I was spraying my Alpinestars Andy's touring suit, and bear in mind this is the original suit which I bought second hand, so it must be about 7 or 8 years old. Sprayed it with a Rewaterproofer, only cost $6.99 from Sports Bike Shop, and then when I inevitably got soaked, there you go, there's the 2-finger gesture, inevitably got soaked, I could just see the water beading off the suit, whereas before I could feel my arms getting damp. So for $6.99 you've really done yourself a favour and waterproofed up your suit. Okay, next tip, speak to other motorcyclists. I would always recommend chatting to people. I'm not the most sociable of people, despite spouting on at stuff on a YouTube channel, but I did have the chance to speak to a couple of guys, and I learned some tips. I learned some roads that perhaps weren't worth the extra effort to go to, and I learned about the weather conditions. Just interesting really to pick up local knowledge. If you speak to other motorcyclists or indeed other people on a tour, you just get a little bit of camaraderie and you'll probably learn something useful, because most people are happy to share with other motorcyclists. Okay, here's another great tip. Earplugs are a must. So more and more people are becoming aware of the importance of having earplugs. Now, it's not the noise of the engine which can permanently damage your hearing, it's the noise of the wind rushing past. And I've tried loads of different helmets, even an Arai RX75 or V, however you say it, meant to be the quietest helmet you can have, still noisy. I still hear that rushing past. I've had to fit two screens, this is an aftermarket, and this one, to try and stop wind, turbulent wind hitting my visor. You can never get rid of it fully, so just wear earplugs and that rushing turbulent noise won't be as problematic for you. And it might be fine up for an hour or two riding around your local countryside, but when you start doing 8-hour days on the road at high speed, that noise will eventually become painful in your ears, and you want to avoid that, so get some earplugs. As far as the brand of earplugs, I don't feel you have to spend 25 quid or 25 euros to get earplugs that are fancy for motorcycling. Just get some simple construction oriented earplugs. You can buy a big pack of them, and I usually would snip off the long bit just so that you can push it into your ear, and then when you put the helmet on, the long bit doesn't catch on the helmet and thus knock them out. So just get some little snips, snip off the extension of the earplug and then push it in with your finger. It'll never go in too far, so don't worry about it getting stuck or anything. Okay, let's talk a little bit about tyres. If your tyres are relatively low, then don't chance it. You don't really know when your tyres are going to wear to below the legal limit. You don't really know the conditions. You could end up in adverse weather, so you really want to have good tyres. So fit new tyres if it looks like your tyres are going to wear out in the next couple of thousand miles. Also with tyres, bear in mind that certain types of tyre, so for example the sporty or sports tourer tyres, they'll be great for carving up your local canyons or your local twisties, but they're going to square off real quick when you go touring, because a lot of the miles are long straight roads, and as I say that, I'm going around some sweeping bends. But you're better off having a hard wearing compound off-road, on-road tyre if you've got an adventure style bike. Don't go for the super sporty ones, because they're softer rubber, softer compound, and they'll just wear quickly and you'll have squared off tyres. So hard compound and significant grip I would advise for touring. Okay, the high-vis vest. What do you need when touring in Europe, particularly France, but also Portugal and Spain? You have to pack with you a high visibility vest. These can be bought for as little as £2.99 in Lidl, or you can go to your scrapyard and you'll find one in the back of an old builder's van, and the scrap man will probably give it to you for free. It doesn't have to be expensive. You don't need a warning triangle unless you're in a four-wheeled vehicle, and then that is mandatory, but it's not mandatory on a motorcycle. Obvious reasons, it's very difficult to put a warning triangle on a motorbike, especially something like a Naked. Okay, just had to check that we were still on the right road there, and yes we are. Got another 14 minutes on the 250. Right, next point is learn some basic yoga. So I'm actually quite lucky because my girlfriend's a yoga teacher, so she constantly tells me what poses to do and not do, but a few basic stretches can really help prolong your days. This is particularly important if you're someone who wants to do 500 miles plus in a day. You won't feel as painful and cramped and sort of awkward if you do some basic stretching before and after your ride. It only has to last about 10 minutes, it's not a big deal. But yoga can go a long way if you want to maintain flexibility and prolong your riding career as you get older as well. People give up sports bikes because they're too uncomfortable, but you can actually improve your your fitness and flexibility, and that'll help with your motorcycling. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a couple of points about security. So last time I talked about bike security, and we will address that this time, but let's talk about your luggage. So I actually take recording equipment on my motorcycle tours because I have a YouTube channel, and I fit all of my bits and bobs that are valuable in lockable metal boxes. I like the idea of soft luggage because if you drop the bike, you're not going to permanently damage it. It's cheaper to begin with, but the fact is that people can either undo it, or even if you lock it with a clip or a padlock, it can just be slashed and things can come out of it. Lockable aluminium boxes, I feel that you'd have to steal the bike really to get out the contents of the boxes. So laptops, cameras, recording equipment, all goes in there for me. Let's talk about, let's give these guys the 2 fingers, yeah. Let's talk about bike security in general then. So I'm going to address a few points, bang, 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 all under this umbrella of bike security. So number 1, there's an expensive motorcycle, Ducati Multistrada. So that illustrates my first point, because your security of your bike starts before you even get on the tour. It's what bike you're taking. Expensive bikes like BMW GSA or the Multistrada, they're stolen not for the value of the bike itself, but for the parts, because you can't actually sell on a stolen vehicle. What you can do is strip it into its parts. Imagine a full Akrapovic system for BMW, that's worth €1,000 or so. So people will steal the bikes and then strip them, and then those parts will go on eBay or whatever, or sold on Facebook Marketplace, and there'll be no trace of where they came from. So if you've got an expensive bike, then your risk goes up considerably. I'm sat on a no-name Chinese adventure bike. I could probably leave this in the middle of a city centre unlocked and nobody would nick it. Partly because I can buy these parts brand new for, well, my side fairings are £30 or £25, so really I don't have to worry as much as if you've got a very premium bike. But what can you do when you're actually out and about? You could take the full chain. Now bear in mind that you'd have to take a 2-meter chain to wrap it around obstacles and the lock. It's going to add significant weight and significant volume to your luggage. I have taken a big chain in the past, but I found it not really necessary. So I would go with either the brake lever lock, the wheel disc lock at the front, just a small, because they're both quite small, those items, or even a D-lock, which can go through the back wheel depending on the front wheel depending on the thickness, the width of the D. The D-lock is also useful because you can put it through part of your bike and loop your helmet through it, so it can be used to secure a helmet to a bike so you can go off walking. There's also the option of fitting a tracking device to your bike. Now I hadn't considered this until recently, but I did fit the SysApp device, which pings an alert to your phone when your bike either is moved with an unrecognized or unregistered movement, or other things happen like the battery falls below a certain level. In theory, the tracker will allow you to see where you are, but also or see where your bike is, but also alert you to any untoward things happening to your motorcycle when you're away from it. So for example, if you're asleep in your accommodation and an alert pings, you'll know that your bike's been moved or tampered with. Okay, final point is the distance you are going to cover in each day. This is a very subjective notion, so bear in mind that what I say will probably differ to what someone else says, and you may think that it's perfectly fine to do 500 miles in a day. Some people will say do 50 miles and then stop. I would probably say 200 kilometers, 150 miles ish is probably about the distance that is your maximum before you want to stop. So stopping little and often can actually have more of a reducing effect on your overall tiredness than doing a big slog and having a big rest. So you can do 50 miles, 70 miles, 60 miles, do 20 miles if you want to, and then rest, top up the bike with fuel when you need to, get something to eat, go to the loo. So I find that is the best way to cover big distances, is stopping little and often. Alright guys, well I hope that video was useful. Not quite as aesthetically pleasing as part 1 of the series, but if you want to hear those tips, then click on that video and you can watch both of them in combination. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to carry on my ride, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.